I want to welcome my good friend Donald Trump Jr. to this conversation today. The Trump family continues making headlines, continues speaking out for freedom, continues to come under fire for doing it. But I wanted to ask him a few questions today about that. First, Don, I want to ask you about the question of censorship. Your father recently announced a rather massive lawsuit against Facebook and Twitter over the censorship that he has gone through and that you've gone through and so many others in the Trump administration continue to go through. Do you want to speak to that for a second, why your father did this exactly and what you expect to happen?
Well, listen, I think half of it's about creating awareness. I think if you've watched what's gone on over the last few months and few years, the censorship only seems to go one way. You know, we get to hear about, oh, no, we're only censoring hate speech. But I've seen some really vile things, Brent, from the other side that doesn't seem to get censored. I see lunatics on the other side doing something. They don't get deplatformed. They don't get demonetized. It only seems to go one way. And so sort of like getting into politics, people are aware of the problem, but not many people are actually willing, able, or ready to fight back and do something about it. Donald Trump led the charge on general conservatism, where so many are out there. They talk a good game when they're in a small group talking to a couple donors or whatever it may be, but they get down to D.C. and then all of a sudden they're very afraid. They're very afraid that someone who hates their guts writes a mean article about them. They're very afraid of criticism from radical leftists, despite what's actually going on, despite the facts. And so, I think it's about taking up yet another challenge that so many on our side are just not willing to fight for.
We have censortrack.org. We look at complaints of censorship. A lot of people have complaints that sometimes just aren't real. But we look at everything that is sent to us. We study it, and when we find the evidence to back it up, we confirm it. We've confirmed over 2,000. I think we're at 2,500 examples of censorship, not bias, but censorship against conservatives. That's what we found. And Axios did a study, a report last week, and in their report, they proclaimed that conservatives have no evidence, have been able to show no evidence of censorship. And today, Business Insider has this headline. I don't know if you've seen it. Facebook executives weren't happy when their own data showed it perpetuates a right-wing echo chamber. One of us is lying. Either we're lying by saying that there are 2,500 examples of this, or they're lying by saying not only does it not exist, but the censorship is really against the left. What do you say?
Well, Brett, first of all, you've noticed how you've never heard a single leftist complain about them getting censored, deplatformed, demonetized, et cetera. It's because it doesn't happen. Yet it happens very frequently to conservatives. I see it myself. The reality is I'm pretty big in that game. I'm pretty big on social. I spend a lot of time on it. So I understand what something's going to do. When I hit send, I pretty much can tell you what it's going to do almost before I see the end results. And I've seen that. I see the dips where I go through periods where my engagement goes to nothing. I mean, I could have 30 million engagements plus a week on certain platforms and get 0 new followers. 0. It just doesn't happen. I go around the country and, hey, Don, your Instagram's the greatest thing in the world. It's the funniest thing ever. And it's like, but I have no growth. But I have thousands of people telling me that stuff on a weekly basis. That doesn't happen on the other side. I've seen when they've locked me out of my account. I don't hear others complaining about it. I know when I've been fact-checked. They do that to ding your account. Most people are too lazy to fight or push back on it. Most of it's about nuance, or they'll try to claim something, but not actually do that, or they'll negate the fact. You get fact-checked all the time on the economy. They say, well, it's because of the pandemic. I go, I didn't say it wasn't. I just said, here are the facts. But by the way, it's not all because of the pandemic. I could find you an economist that will tell you that, no, it's because, I don't know, energy prices. Probably not COVID. I understand, just like the revolution in Cuba is probably not because of COVID vaccinations or the shortage thereof. There's probably other underlying things, but they don't make it seem that way. Sean Parnell, who's running for Senate as a conservative, as a Republican in Pennsylvania, he got fact-checked for putting up the percentages of inflation today. I got a ding on my account. I got an email from Instagram stating that in April of 2020, I posted something that violates the BBC's rules on music apparently they own the music. And I look back and I look at the post, because you have to fight all of these things. Because if you don't, that's when they ding you and your engagement goes to hell. And that's sort of how they win subtly, because they figure, oh, it's not a big deal. But you get 2 or 3 of those, and then you realize you get nothing for months in terms of engagement. So you have to push back. So I look at the post. You know what the post was? It was a reporter asking my father during the White House press briefing about a joke that I made on the radio about the Tiger King, right? Tiger King was a big deal back in the day at the beginning of the pandemic. So I would jokingly on a radio, and even the reporter, as bad as they are, acknowledged in the question that I jokingly said on an interview about a pardon for the Tiger King. So I didn't hear any music in there. But the thing is that I somehow infringed on something that they own music, because I reposted the White House press briefing, which aired on national TV, a question to my father about me with no music. And 18 months later, they're trying to say that it's some sort of IP infringement. I mean, this happened to me this week. I mean, this stuff doesn't go on the other side. So we have to acknowledge that, I mean, literally anyone that says it doesn't exist is either dishonest, a moron, or both.
Yeah, but Don, it's you're hitting on something, because it's not just stories. It's any expression of anything made by a conservative that might somehow show liberalism or radicalism in a bad light is censored. I think the best example is the Babylon Bee. It's a parody site. It is. It's a joke. It's a humor outlet, and yet
I've been fact-checked for reposting their stuff.
There you go.
And it's like, man, if you don't see that it's parody, or you're pretending that it's not, again, stupid or dishonest, maybe both. But it's really endemic. I mean, I see it in my Twitter engagement a lot, because obviously that's where I'm probably most political. On Instagram, I have more fun and joke. If you watch me on Facebook, that's sort of where I do literally daily messages. I'll see what's sort of big of the day and give you my commentary on that. But Twitter, I look at what's going on there, and I know I'm getting 25% of the retweets I used to get. My content is no different, but they've decided I've gotten powerful enough. We're going to limit that engagement. There's literally no other explanation. I haven't lost followers, though. They scrub the accounts every once in a while. As soon as I get some sort of real growth in some of these platforms, you get growth. I mean, I was getting, in some cases, 25,000 new followers a day on some of these platforms, and then they realize, zero. I mean, when you see a steady line and you have millions of engagement, I could understand dropping. I can understand going up, but to have zero over that many millions of people, it's literally a statistical impossibility. And when you start talking about statistical impossibilities, and there are many, okay, we've seen them all. They're not limited to social media, whether it's when we start talking about statistical abnormalities, whether it comes to elections, when you start talking about it as it relates to COVID, when you're talking about mortality rates for minors, 99.997 under 20, like you're not even allowed to say those things. You literally see what happens in the weeks to follow. So there's things you're not allowed to touch on. And I think, to me, there's no other conclusion that a reasonable individual could come to other than it's intentional, because they don't want you pushing back on their narrative. The media, social media, they are with the Democrats. There's no question. Just look at their donations. Just look at the things that they do. And they want to make sure. I wrote a book about it last summer called Liberal Privilege. And it's very clear that if you cross that narrative, you will be shut down. They are the marketing arm of the radical left, and it should be very apparent to anyone who's watching.
Speaking of liberals who are privileged, I don't know if you recall, of course you're going to remember this, but when your father first used the term about the media, that they were the greatest enemy.
They were the enemy of the people.
The enemy of the American people. Yeah, I mean the left just crucified him for this because of the outrage, the hyperbole, the exaggeration, the vilification, the personalization of it. They were so offended. Isn't it striking that Rasmussen has just come out with a poll showing 58% of the American people believe the media are the enemy of the American people. That means that if every single person who voted for Donald Trump were agreeing with that, that is every one of them, and some Biden voters are also agreeing about this. I mean, it's striking.
I think that study also shows that 42% of people are either idiots or not watching. So, no, I mean, without question. I mean, it's hard to do. I mean, look at what's going on in the world. Look at the cover-up for China during the pandemic. Look at, I use the example when I'm speaking. I used it at CPAC last week. At what point in logical thought was the Wuhan lab leak theory not the most plausible argument for how we got the coronavirus? I mean, you're telling me that the lab that studies the exact virus we're talking about in the town where it originated, science tells us that that can't possibly have come from there. And if you do, you're anti-science, you're deplatformed, you're in big trouble, you'll never see the light of day again. But about 3 feet outside of the lab, that's where it originated from, magically. Like, we're to believe that. That's how bad it's gotten. And the media went full time because they couldn't give Trump a win because he said that. Same thing with the studies as it relates to hydroxychloroquine. Same thing with Russia, Russia, Russia. Same thing with Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. I've dealt with it myself personally, right? Don Jr. committed treason. Don Jr. lied before Congress and perjured himself. He's going to go to prison for a long time. I've heard it all. You don't think that those people would have done it if there was any truth to it? Now, it doesn't stop them from utilizing it. It doesn't stop them from weaponizing these things for years and for months to sow some doubt, to get what they want, to influence others to be able to do the same. So, they're still winning with it, even if they're proven to be foolish later. And you saw the scientists came out, well, we know, I guess, Wuhan lab leak, that was kind of an obvious one. We just didn't want to agree with Trump because that's how science works, right, Brent? In 2021, science is racist and so is math. And if you actually follow the rules and laws of physics or epidemiology, you may go against Jake Tapper at CNN. And that's the first rule of science. You can't do that. You must always go by the CNN narrative, not what literal decades and centuries of science tell us to be the fact. That is no longer the case because someone will call it racist and therefore it's racist and must be shut down.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is this. You had, when the thing broke, you had speculation. It was from a bat in a market. It was from a lab. Nobody knew for certain. It needed to be investigated. That idea was not allowed. That conversation that I just had, their speculation beat any other speculation. Their speculation became fact. Okay, my final question to you about your book, Liberal Privilege. I want to touch on something that's in your book that you talk about around the country. Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, son of President Biden, as you, son of President Trump. The President Trump, made a statement at CPAC that I like because he was citing our poll. But he showed that 10%, if 10% of Biden's voters had known about Hunter Biden, that Donald Trump would have won every single battleground state. In fact, that's absolutely true. In fact, it's even worse than that. Our survey found that 58% of Biden's voters knew nothing about Hunter Biden, which was an extraordinary thing. And you deal with this topic in your book. What's your view on the fact that 58% of Biden's voters, what does that say about the quality of the vote?
I think it drives home the point about the media being the enemy of the people because this stuff was out there. It was then criticized by the DC establishment and the deep state types as Russian disinformation. When I talk about it, I get yelled at because the family of the president is off limits, which was news to me, Brent, because after 30 hours of testimony before Congress and the Senate, I didn't realize myself that family was off limits. It just seems to be off limits when it's a Democrat in power. Hence the title Liberal Privilege. That's the reality. All of the information that we see out there that we question today or that we know to be now fact or now it's okay to discuss again, like Wuhan lab leak theory, Like, okay, well, maybe the people who lied to us about spying on American people were the same people pushing the nonsense about Russian disinformation that was never proven, that many to this day still run with it as though it's the gospel. You know, people have to wake up. They have to get their news from alternative sources. They have to do it. I take that one pretty personally because I went through a lot. You know, what do you think would happen, Brent, if for example, Donald Trump Jr. started finger painting like Hunter Biden and started selling them to unknown buyers for $500,000. Now, I know that there was a Picasso that traded this week for 150 grand. Hunter Biden is a journeyman artist who, never really expressed any interest in art until he wasn't, I guess, allowed to do crooked deals in China or the Ukraine or for Russian oligarchs with tied to human trafficking rings or any of those things anymore. Now he's an artist. And imagine Donald Trump Jr. did that, what the outrage would be. Imagine the White House said, no, we should fully support his career as an artist, but we should also support the ability of the people who buy his art to remain anonymous. I mean, if we had a media that actually, did journalism, that would be a problem. But we don't have a media that does journalism. We have propagandists. We have people that push a one-sided narrative. So all the things, I mean, look at the laptop from hell. Do we truly believe that if it was Don Jr.'s laptop from hell, that our intelligence agencies would be saying, no, it looks legit. It's Russian disinformation. It's totally fine. Hunter definitely didn't do those things, especially when Hunter and the Bidens aren't denying that any of it's true. Do you think it would be a problem if Don Jr., I mean, they love to say, because, I'm a hyper guy. I'm pretty animated. I get aggressive. I'm not what my father would dub low energy. And so, every time I give a speech, Don Jr.'s, he's on cocaine. They're really quiet about like actual pictures of Hunter Biden with a crack pipe. Imagine Don Jr. told a story trying to, get some sympathy for himself about smoking Parmesan cheese. Imagine Don Jr. knocked up a stripper and then ran from alimony or child support for the next 4 or 5 years. Do you think it would be a story, Brent? Do you think maybe that would make the news? Do you think maybe the family of a president should be off limits? What does he have to do with it? I wasn't in government either. I was vocal because I was one of the few people willing to stand up to the narrative. I was vocal and became very political because, again, we don't have a bench. And more importantly, we don't have the backing of $1 trillion industry like big tech and or media, the combination, who are simply functioning as the marketing arm of the opposition. So, okay, well, I'll get in the game. I'll get in the fight, kind of like the fight. So, I got involved because of that. But, I look at the double standard with what they say and what they do. And it's sort of like, does it get any more glaring than that? I mean, does the bias become any more apparent than that? And, I use the example often only because it is personal to me. I've seen what they tried to do to me. I think anyone watching can probably look at it. And I think we all understand that if it was my laptop, any one of those 90 things, that would be totally disqualifying. The degenerate stuff, the stuff as it relates to shady business dealings, the payments from people tied to literally organized crime and prostitution rings. Any one of those things would be 100% disqualifying to myself and then my father as president. But with Hunter, it's a problem with addiction. Sure, I understand. I get it. People have addiction problems. It's terrible. It doesn't absolve you from being a piece of garbage. It doesn't allow you to sell out your country. It doesn't allow you to sell your father's position and power. It doesn't allow for those things. And yet they seem to only look at it one way.
The addiction might explain some things. It excuses nothing. The very first thing you said in that statement was the thing nobody should ever forget. Absolutely no one on the Biden's team has denied that this isn't Hunter Biden's laptop. And if they were going to be honest with the American people, and they suffer from a lack of honesty over there, they would have explained who the big guy was. When he put in the 10% of this sneaky company that was being set up with Chinese government officials, that 10% of the money was going to go to the quote unquote big guy.
Yeah.
If they were above board, if they're honest and honorable, they tell us.
Do you think I'd get the benefit of the doubt and say, well, we're not sure who the big guy is? Would they give me the benefit of the doubt? Do you think I've never gotten the benefit of the doubt on anything. And that's fine. I'm used to playing the game. It just means I'm going to be extra loud about the hypocrisy. And that's the whole point. when I wrote Liberal Privilege, the book could now be called I Told You So, because the information was out there, but they weren't willing to disseminate it. Just like they shut down the New York Post article. I mean, it's like the second oldest paper in the country wasn't allowed to publish this thing. Anyone who mentioned it was shut down. Twitter locked them out of their account. I mean, where's, the FEC in terms of investigating the free donations to the Biden campaign, totally protecting them, because we know it wouldn't have happened the other way. And that was, worth the entire campaign. They didn't need to do anything. Joe Biden didn't need to do campaign events because he had people running total cover for him that had total control. But, I said it in the book. I was like, Joe Biden is not going to be a moderate. He's not going to be a moderate on energy. Look at what happened. The day one, they shut down the energy pipeline. He's going to be a radical at the border. We have a humanitarian crisis at the border, and they have the gall to try to blame the Trump administration. So you're telling me you roll out the welcoming mat, promising free education, promising free healthcare, promising this, a week after Trump leaves office, they all magically show up. That was Trump's fault? Like, stop. They're going to be radical on everything, because I don't think Joe Biden's actually pulling the strings. But he has a puppet master that is doing it. And that person, whoever it is, or that group of people, are radicals. They've been radical on everything. Just look at what they're trying to do with the Second Amendment. I mean, they're trying to appoint David Chipman, someone who worked for years for the radical anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment lobby. He's going to be the director of the ATF, a radical anti-gunner. So, if you go to file your thing to get a suppressor or whatever it may be, or the basic gun rules, or, the guys that dictate rules on magazines or will be setting forth the policy, you have a radical anti-gun lobbyist running that agency. Does anyone who believes in the Second Amendment actually think that won't be weaponized? Does anyone who believes in the Second Amendment think that guy is going to, we're not just going to hold people up arbitrarily or go after people's gun rights? And if you look at what's going on right now in Cuba, if you look at what's going on right now in South Africa, you understand why our founding fathers said the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And it's for a reason. Again, I think Cuba is perhaps the greatest example of that, because you have a dictator, a communist dictator, ordering people to get mowed down in the streets. They're all unarmed. So people have to get involved. They have to understand what's really going on, because they're being sold a bill of goods by a mainstream media and by social media. The information that they're able to garner and get a glimpse at is so diluted and watered down to preserve the Democrat message. When you see what's actually going on, it's radical. So you have to start calling your senators. If you want to protect your family, the Second Amendment is going to be gone if a guy like David Chipman gets in there. He's already been nominated. Now he's got to go through the Senate. But are people calling, red state senators that have Democrat, credentials, whether it's a Manchin, whether it's a Tester, whether it's, some of the people in Arizona, in Maine, we got to be calling our senators and say, hey, this stuff's not going to fly. We understand what's really going on. We understand what CNN tells us, but as I like to say, is that the truth, or did you see it on CNN?
I'm going to leave you with this thought. I don't know if you remember Boys Life magazine, and remember the old Goofus and Gallant cartoon? They were two characters. Goofus always did everything wrong, and Gallant did the same thing correctly. I think by the end of 2024, you're going to have the most stark example of Goofus and Gallant in American political history. You're going to have the record of your father and the record of Joe Biden side by side. And you're going to see on all those issues, you're going to see exactly, call it achievement, call it failure, I don't care. You're going to see exactly what your father did, and you're going to see exactly what Joe Biden did. And I think the American people are going to understand for once and for all what freedom is all about.
I agree with that. I think Joe Biden's greatest achievement will be showing the American people how great Donald Trump actually was. I think it's 100% true. You see it every day. Again, you see it, the news. Joe Biden created more jobs than any American president ever. Isn't it wonderful? It's like, you mean the jobs that government and state governors in blue states force them to not be able to go to? They can go back to work, and that's job creation. Yeah, I mean, I guess on face value, that's the stat. But does anyone actually believe that that's true? Does anyone actually believe it's real, or it's because of his policies? No one is that stupid, but they will sell you it. And if I go on social media and I say, hey, stop, this is nonsense, I'll be deplatformed for, going against the fact, and they'll have plenty of, fact checkers that only check one way. I think the CNN fact check, the main one, he hasn't fact checked Biden in a month. That was a stat I saw the other day. In 1 month, he has not been fact checked. Like, have you heard the guy try to speak? He can't get through a sentence. Like, he's making mistakes whether he means it or not. But like, come on, let's not kid ourselves.
When they talk about 400 and some thousand jobs being created last month, they ought to have been fact-checked by everybody, given the fact that 188,000 of them were government jobs.
Or use one of the missing context things that they try to do on us all the time. Because, yeah, the context that's missing is that people just went back to work. Like, real jobs weren't created. People are just going back to jobs they had or trying to fill it. The reality is this. There are millions of unfilled jobs right now because the Biden administration has been paying people to sit on their couch. No one talks about that. But I know if I posted the actual facts, it would be, well, incomplete information. It's missing context. But the context, again, like the fact checks, only go one way.
I got a feeling, Don, that you're going to be outspoken for quite some time. Don Jr., thank you so much for your time with us today.
Thanks, Brent. Have a good one.